I've just checked in online for tomorrow morning's flight from New York back to London in Virgin Atlantic Premium. Premium economy is often marketed as the perfect middle ground, far better than economy, but much cheaper than business class. But on a daytime flight across the Atlantic, where you're awake for the entire journey, the experience matters much more. So the question for this flight is simple. Does Virgin Atlantic Premium actually feel premium? Welcome to the channel. I'm Anthony, and with over 20 years of business class flying and more than 1 million miles in the air, I've seen just about everything at 35,000 feet.
Cabin crew doors to automatic cross-check.
Here at Doors to Automatic, I bring you in-depth, honest reviews of premium services with a particular focus on transatlantic travel. If you're interested in the best ways to fly between London and the US, hit that subscribe button and come along for the ride. My journey started early at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport Terminal 4. Virgin Atlantic's check-in desks were in the middle of the terminal. There were dedicated desks for premium passengers. The baggage allowance was 2 checked bags, each weighing up to 23 kilos, which is just over 50 pounds. From check-in, it was a very short walk to the very long security lines. No fast track for premium passengers. Airside, you then went down escalators into the main departure hall. In the central area, there was a range of shops and some food outlets, and then plenty of seating by the gates. The flight was on the oldest aircraft in Virgin's current fleet. It was an Airbus A330-300, registration Golf Victor Sierra X-Ray Yankee, called Beauty Queen. It's due to leave Virgin's fleet possibly as soon as later this year, as the airline takes delivery of more replacement A330-900 Neo aircraft. Boarding had already started when I arrived at the gate, about 10 minutes ahead of the scheduled boarding time. Premium passengers boarded in boarding group 2 after upper class passengers. Premium was in the front section of the second cabin of the aircraft. There were 48 seats in a 232 configuration. I was in the bulkhead window seat at the front of the cabin, 18 Alpha. The seat had a width of 20 inches compared to 18 inches in economy. It could recline up to 7 inches compared to 6 in economy. There was more legroom on the bulkhead, but the pitch between the other rows was 38 inches compared to 31 inches in standard economy. The sides of the headrest could be adjusted. Waiting on the seat were some amenities, more on those later. There was so much legroom I couldn't reach the bulkhead even fully stretched. One disadvantage of the bulkhead was that it was right beside the galley. Soon Prosecco, juice or water were offered. To the side of the seat was a controller for the entertainment system, together with controls to adjust the seat. There was also a USB-A port. On the other side of the seat, the tray table was below the armrest. This was the same for all seats, not just the bulkhead. Overhead were reading lights and individual air vents. An amenity kit was provided. It contained a toothbrush and toothpaste, earplugs, socks and an eye mask. Duty-free brochures had also returned to Virgin after a supply issue last year. The entertainment screen folded out ready for the safety video. However, in the end, a manual safety briefing was given instead. I was told this was because one engine had to be started at the gate prior to pushback. There was a delay in the air bridge retracting while the engine was started. A bit of ground kit to do this, the air start unit, hadn't worked and a replacement had to be brought from elsewhere in the airport. Whilst we waited, cups of water were offered around. The toilets were also reopened. We finally pushed back at 9:39 AM. We taxied from gate A2 at Terminal 4 to take off from runway 22 right. We arrived at the runway in thick fog at 10:12 AM. If you're enjoying the review so far, there's another way you can support the channel. Over on Patreon, you can join the Doors to Automatic cabin crew. For the price of an airline coffee each month, members get early access to new reviews, behind the scenes updates, and the chance to help shape future trips and videos. There's a link in the description if you'd like to come on board. The flight time from New York to London was scheduled to be 6 hours and 50 minutes. But with favourable conditions, we could expect a flight time of 5 hours and 57 minutes. This meant the ground delays at JFK should be made up in flight. After takeoff, I checked out the entertainment system. But first, it's worth noting there was a power socket below the seats at floor level. The screen folded up from between the seats. There was a fair range of content available, with 123 new movies, 135 television series and 972 audio albums. Pretty poor quality headphones were provided. I'm glad I brought my AirPods and an adapter along. Wi-Fi was available for a fee. The full flight pass cost £21. Good download speeds of 18.7 megabits per second were provided, more than enough to check messages and social media. And those speeds were fairly consistent throughout the flight. Soon, the crew were preparing the breakfast service in the galley. Even the flight service manager was mucking in, as the crew was one short due to illness. There was a choice of a turkey, egg and cheese muffin or a bagel with tomato, egg and cream cheese. The tray table folded out from the armrest. The breakfast was served on a tray. There was a Greek yogurt with mixed berry compote alongside a pouch of granola. I opted for the breakfast muffin. Accompanying breakfast, I opted for tea and orange juice. A bottle of water was also on the tray. A paper napkin was provided, but with metal cutlery. The breakfast muffin was fairly overcooked and melted to its wrapping. Overall, the breakfast was okay, but nothing special. Refills of tea and coffee were offered as the trays were cleared away. As we settled into the middle stretch of the flight, a curtain was drawn to close off the galley. There were 2 toilets for premium, both at the front of the cabin. One benefit of the bulkhead seat was I could get out without disturbing my neighbour. Given the age of the aircraft, the toilets were in good condition. One bathroom was shared with upper class, so premium toiletries were provided. In the other, it was just standard soap. In both, a changing table folded down from the wall. Snacks were available from the galley throughout the flight. A small cushion was provided, alongside a fleece blanket. For the bulkhead seats, footstools were also brought out after takeoff. Other seats had a fixed footstool. About 2 hours prior to landing, I was offered a glass of upper-class champagne as a thank you for being a frequent flyer. A nice touch. I'd been offered a glass earlier in the flight too, but was working. Drinks were then offered. A good selection was available. Packets of sour cream nibbles were also provided. Just as the crew got into the aisle serving drinks, we hit severe turbulence and the pilot instructed them to take their seats. One of the crew later told me she'd just finished pouring drinks for the upper class bar when the turbulence hit. The entire counter became a sea of red wine. Turbulence over, the main meal service began. On the menu was a fixed starter and dessert, with a choice of 3 main courses: chicken kakuni with rice, salmon fillet with roasted vegetables and new potatoes, or penne pasta with vegetable bolognese. Your preferred main course could be pre-ordered before the flight. The meal arrived on a tray with plastic domes over each course. The starter was a caprese salad. For main course, I pre-ordered the Japanese-style slow-braised chicken kakuni with mixed vegetables and rice. Another option was the penne pasta with tomato sauce and vegetable bolognese. The dessert was an apple and cranberry crumble tart, followed by a cheese plate. Again, a paper napkin was provided, but with metal cutlery. Cans of nice wine were offered. That is a wine called Nice, rather than a description of its quality. Overall, it was a good meal, and certainly at the more premium end of premium economy dining compared to other transatlantic carriers. It wasn't long before we were preparing to land at Heathrow. We came into land from the west on runway 09 left after one loop in the hold and taxied to a gate at Terminal 3. We arrived 10 minutes early despite the hold-ups at JFK. On a return ticket costing £1,753 versus £472 in economy, does premium justify the premium? Overall, yes. Despite a flight that tested everything from the ground equipment to mid-Atlantic turbulence, the crew were excellent. There were warm welcomes after boarding, with friendly service throughout. The entertainment system functioned well, with a good range of content. The flimsy headphones were the only disappointment there, but as I had my own AirPods, that wasn't an issue. The Wi-Fi performed well throughout the flight. With Starlink coming to Virgin Atlantic later this year, connectivity can only get better still. The meals were good, the main course more so than the breakfast, with the muffin melted to the wrapping. But the overall quality was there, with varied choices of main course that stood out from the standard premium economy chicken or beef offer. The choice of drinks was also very good, despite the wine being nice. So does Virgin Atlantic Premium actually feel premium? On this flight, yes, it did. The crew, the catering, the seat, the connectivity, they all came together as a genuine premium experience, despite everything that went on around them. But what do you think? I'd be interested to know your thoughts, particularly if you've flown Virgin Premium recently. Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed the review, do give it a thumbs up. Please do subscribe for future reviews. And now here are 4 reviews of premium economy on other transatlantic carriers.